The Nerd Frenzy Podcast.
Well, hello, my friends. It's Nick from the Nerd Frenzy Podcast, and we got ourselves a special guest today. My lovable, wonderful, very talented Keaton, everyone. How's it going, Keaton?
Hello. Good. How are you doing, Nick?
Oh, very, very good. I've been wanting to do this with you for a long time because most of us in our family, we share this amazing, like it's a good thing. We could be saying, hey, we all know how to do STEM research, but no, we share this beautiful thing for a thing called entertainment industry. So, my lovely sister Keaton, today we are talking about Leonardo DiCaprio, and you and I, and pretty much the whole family, has been a fan of him since what? Growing Pains, would you say? Or even maybe
Yeah.
a little later than that? Or is that something that was not as established as What's Eating Gilbert Grape?
Yeah, I would say that was his first film that I actually, without looking back on like having to do research and stuff, like that's the first one that I remember quite well. I know that he did Growing Pains and a few other things beforehand, but that
Critters
was
3.
big. Critters 3, notable.
Let's spend the rest of our time just talking about
Yes.
Critters 3.
I know. And let's talk about the first two also.
Oh, well, actually, I like the
Oh
first
my
two.
God.
Um,
The third one. Oh,
oh,
poor guy.
I know, seriously. But the funny thing is he actually was the best thing about it.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've seen that one that I don't even have many comments to say, and I'm kind of grateful for that.
Seriously. So I remember watching What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and everyone's excellent in the movie, but what stole the show completely for me, of course, was Leo. And there's many different versions of someone playing someone who's mentally challenged, but he played it in a way that I've never seen anyone do that thing where he does with it, kind of like he has his like, finger on his nose, kind of like licks it, kind of like he just does that thing. He's always like, "Gonna find me," and I've never seen anyone do that before. And I always think of Leo when I think of great performances because there's a lot of hard things to do, especially at that age.
Yeah, I think he was like, I mean, he was still a teenager whenever he did that movie. Just the bizarre things. I know that during a super serious part, if Johnny Depp had a super serious line, he'd be in the background like doing something totally bizarre and stealing the show, even though it was a really intense, serious moment where we're all supposed to be super focused on, Johnny Depp. We're staring at Arnie in the background, like throwing spaghetti
Arnie.
or something,
Oh, whenever he's in the bathtub and he leaves him in there, and then he goes and hangs out with Juliette Lewis, and then comes back and he's sitting there shaking. I remember I was pissed off at Johnny Depp. I'm like, Gilbert, you're a
In
piece of
real
crap in real life, and I still haven't got over it, and that's why I don't support his movies.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No, I think the biggest moment in that one was whenever his mother passed and he's standing there and it's like a super quiet, he's pretty much by himself in that scene. He's for a couple minutes goes by of him like waiting for her to wake up, and you like believe that that's actually happening. That was probably the best moment, and I mean for him in that movie. Where your heart's breaking for him because he's like, okay, it's not funny anymore, Mom. Like you're like, wake up now.
Oh,
Heartbreaking.
and he must have like a casting call for little actors that they're expecting adult performances from, because I could probably just quickly name 10 movies where he has to have a really intense like yelling or crying scene, and half those movies he was 13 years old when he was doing it. And I was just like,
Yeah.
what other actor has portrayed that in such a amazing manner as him?
He somehow managed to grasp those emotions so young, and just kind of brushing up and watching a couple videos here and there today. He's very humble about
Almost shy.
his Yeah, he's very, which makes me like him even more. I didn't realize how humble he was, and because I wouldn't say that he's a method actor where he dives in aggressively to do a role.
Right, no Marlon
Instead,
Brando or Christian Bale. Yeah.
yeah, he's very much able to kind of turn it on and off the way he did Arnie, and then I mean all of the roles that he's played where he's been completely different than the person that he is. Jordan Belfort and Candy from Django,
Hmm.
the most hated probably character.
With nice teeth too.
Super nice teeth. Yeah.
So we were talking on the phone yesterday, and you sent me a picture of one of the best memes I've ever seen. It's of Leo kind of making that little snarky like kind of thing. Here, you do it better than I do, but there's something to that kind of character that when you see him, he's repulsive in every single manner. He's rude. I mean, I guess he has a little bit of class, but he thinks he's more intelligent than he really is, and he's like a social aristocrat. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
he's just a disgusting slob, and you're thinking this is Leonardo DiCaprio, the guy who usually every movie has something different to portray, and here's his scum villain. I mean, it's one of his best
Yeah,
performances.
I agree. And like you said, it's not just he's an evil racist in that movie. He was essentially in that movie, his character was raised by black people
Hmm.
where it was completely normal. So it was almost, but he had to kind of have that line of inspiration where they were beneath him. But then there was the dynamic of Kevin or Steven's character or Steven. Um,
Oh, Samuel L. Jackson.
yes, thank
Oh,
you.
brilliant, brilliant role.
Where he was actually above, like he was superior in a lot of ways to Leonardo DiCaprio's character. Christoph Waltz's character calling him out about Alexander Dumas. The book basically like you find out he's not an educated person. He just kind of sits on this he's running a plantation, and he's a huge, like one of the most decrepit characters ever written in so many ways.
The faces he makes just shows he has that old like 50s like playing with his little mustache and like yes I'm gonna get you, and
Yeah,
the whole time you're like you're just slimy piece of crap, and yet I've seen you in movies where you're the sweetest, most loving person. And most actors, there's very few who can pull off so many different varieties. And Leonardo DiCaprio, especially at his age, he's in his what, I think he's his mid late 40s, and he's already accomplished more than most of the most pristine actors of all time. I mean, if he died right now, people would say, yeah, he's one of the greats, and he's probably, and
yeah,
hopefully he has 40 more years of wonderfulness too.
yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with that. And that's what, going over my favorite movies with him, it's a very difficult to compile that list.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult not to have 10 or 15 on that list.
Oh, I know, because you feel like, well, you're betraying the other ones because they're that good too. But just quickly off the cuff, what would you say? Just two or three of your favorites. Just like what's a movie that like Shawshank Redemption, but for Leonardo DiCaprio for you?
As far as his performance, like his best acting, Aviator or Wolf of Wall Street, they're really like whenever he kind of becomes that character where you like believe that this person exists. I mean, and in that case, he does.
Seriously.
But
Seriously, and Wolf of Wall Street was one of those things too. And I'm going to be one of those naysayers. I love The Revenant, but I think that his acting was not any more oppressive than it was many times before that. I think just the cinematography, the conditions of the weather, and everything else allowed that movie to be way better than it was. And of course, his acting was amazing. Tom Hardy, all those people were amazing. But I think he should have won Oscars for other movies, like such as Wolf of Wall Street. And I think even though Wolf of Wall Street's not my favorite movie from him, I feel like especially the scene where he's on the Quaaludes and he has too many Quaaludes and he's like laying on the floor he's not drunk, but he's kind of like all weird drugged. And I'm just seeing Leonardo DiCaprio, a man who he wants everyone. I'm the best actor in the world, and there's a guy laying on the floor going,
I
oh.
know Yeah, I that whole scene was insane, and I know that he actually had the real character, the real guy, Jordan
Belfort.
Belfort. He had him like on call basically to call him and say, "Hey, we're doing this scene. What was going through your mind when
Oh,
when this is
man.
happening? Like, help me out. Why did you do this?" And in a lot of cases, he said when he was writing the book, it was actually toned down a lot. So the movie,
Jeez, that was an
yeah, so
intense
the
dude.
movie, he was just saying, so you could actually go a little bit above and beyond here, and he sure did. And him
He
and
sure did. Did you?
he sure did. He sure
Your
did do
voice,
that.
you became the character and scene. Oh, maybe not necessarily because of his acting, because he's always excellent, but I think his best movie that he is in, just because it's my opinion, I say his best movie is Departed, though, just because everyone is excellent in that movie.
He's so good in that movie,
Yeah.
and that's such a good movie because that's Jack Nicholson and Brad Pitt,
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
Matt
A lot of
Damon.
good. I was gonna also mention Catch Me If You Can. That's a really, really good movie.
And he's probably in his
Also
late
about a
teens,
real.
early 20s in real life, and he's performing a real life character who's played 5 or 6 different like deceptive roles, and he did them all like under the guise of the Flash characters, and he just owned it. And of course, Leonardo
Oh yeah,
DiCaprio, for someone, I mean, could you imagine Keaton there sitting there, hey guys, we need a guy who's 19 years old and who can handle this kind of mature stuff, and who are they going to ask for? Probably 9 times out of 10 is him, because we've seen him go through so many different emotions, and this was all at the age of like 8. So
yeah.
and even though I'd say the best actor of all time, even though he's only been in 10 movies, is probably Daniel Day-Lewis, because I mean he does a thing where he actually changes certain mannerisms. But Leonardo DiCaprio is probably going to go down, in my opinion, as being the Steven Spielberg of actors, where it's just constant hits and hits and hits and hits.
That's the thing about him. For the most part, he's been very meticulous. Once he was on the radar, he's been very meticulous about the people, the actors, the directors that he surrounds himself with. Daniel Day-Lewis, that's Gangs in New York, right?
Oh yeah, and what's funny about that is they're both in that, and
Okay.
the only time that I've really ever seen Keaton someone look better than Leonardo DiCaprio was Daniel Day-Lewis as the Butcher, and maybe it's because his character was so much more fascinating. Well, they both had really good characters, but when you see Daniel Day-Lewis, everyone else does not even come close to shining around him. He just has that oh kind of thing going around him the whole time.
When I was asking Michael earlier what his favorite movies were, I listed Gangs in New York because that's one of he really likes that movie,
That's a good
and I
one.
said I would guess that it was that one. He's like, well, that's not my favorite performance of Leo's because Daniel Day-Lewis is like his character outshines him. There's in that movie, and he's still good in every movie that he's been in, especially Critters 3.
Especially Critters 3. But I go back to that though. When I watched the movie, I remember thinking literally every single actor who's 40, 50, 60, 70 years old is looking really corny, and then you have this little 12-year-old who's I could see like this guy has potential already. And then I think a year or two after that he did Basketball Diaries, and I don't do you remember Basketball Diaries?
He had a drug problem. I only saw it when I was pretty young. That was the one where he had a drug problem, right?
Yes, he was a really good basketball player. Marky Mark was in it with him. A couple other people from like Hook was in there with him. But they were a really good basketball team. They just started doing the drugs, and it shows the decline of that. And of course, with Leo in the helm, he's sitting there, has a bunch of amazing performances. But there's one he has with, and I forget the actor's name, but she's the mom in Radio Flyer and the therapist in Sopranos, and Goodfellas, of course. There's a part in Basketball Diaries whenever Leo goes back to mom because she kicked him out, because of his bad drugs, and he's just knocking on the door, and he's like, "Mom, let me in, please. I need you." And she's sitting there, she's crying on the other side, and it's just this beautiful exchange back and forth of just what you want to see in a movie that has these kind of breathtaking performances. But I remember thinking, like I said, this guy's a third of the age of this lady, and he's killing it as per usual. I mean, always awesome.
I do remember that scene, him being outside, and doesn't she have the like hotel kind of chain lock so the door is ajar?
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
he's trying to beg her. He's trying to get money from her, and he's
Yep.
begging her, and then it turns into him like losing it, and he's calling her names and stuff.
Being a mother, she's sitting there seeing her baby boy in the most pain he's ever been, physical too, probably from the lack of the medicine, he would be calling it. But and then you see his performance, this 16-year-old kid who's sitting there, snot coming out of his nose, and he's sitting there just begging his mom, like, please, I'm hurting, you're letting your son hurt. And I'm like, this is a, and of course she was doing the right thing, but I'm still thinking, like, let your damn son in.
Yeah, this is Leo.
He's crying. But there's, and then you see something that made him really big, which was not even necessarily because of his acting, but just because of his charm, was the Titanic. And I mean, that was the biggest movie of all time for like 20 years before, oddly enough, James Cameron came out with Avatar. His other movie is like, well, I'll just go ahead and break my own record, even though. I remember watching it, and of course, we all watch it for the same reasons. We want to see Kate Winslet being drawn like a French woman.
Yes.
But you actually find out that the movie's quite excellent. But yeah, I remember going to theaters, what was it, 98 and 97? And I'm not going to, I think it was like 12 or 13. And I remember, okay, Kate Winslet, that's all I wanted, that's all I cared for. And then the movie itself was really good. And then all I could think of was, well, Kate, you let your man die, you scum.
Yeah, I think the chemistry between them and that movie was so grand, and it had so many other things going on. It's hard to attribute it to, I mean, it obviously wasn't just because of Leonardo DiCaprio's performance. It was a bunch of other things, but
Sure.
I think my favorite part in that one where is when he's sitting at the table and he's explaining luck basically to all these rich folks, and he's saying he won a hand at poker, and this is why he's here drinking champagne with you fine folk, you fine people.
The American dream kind of thing,
right
yeah.
there. Yeah, because they're like, oh, you scum, and then he has this very like charismatic speech where he's explaining, oh, I just won this at a hand of poker, and I just see where life takes me, and me being female obviously gets very drawn into that, and you being
me being male gets drawn into that too. I'm thinking, well, Leo, you handsome devil, you little slice of home cheese, you. Is home cheese a thing?
Home cheese? Sure.
Sure. You just made it a thing.
Kathy Bates, I know, was like, she wasn't the only one at that table that was like, yum.
And she just probably got done being in a movie with Adam Sandler and Waterboy, so she's like, yeah, definitely yum.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Oh, I can't. It's etched in my brain. I'm just laying there going, I just sound like Peter Griffin.
Oh my gosh. For whatever reason, Misery is the first movie that usually comes to mind when I think of
Oh,
Kathy
sure.
Bates.
Oh, sure.
So,
Yeah.
Totally different from Waterboy.
Yeah, and it's funny because, she was going that whole different route because her agent recommended, hey, Adam Sandler's this new guy that's killing it, and she didn't really want him to be with him because she thought he was kind of, silly, and then it ends up helping her career, so she started getting projects that were a little more, I guess, universal, not so much dramatic. But
yeah.
She's great. She's great, and she was great. And what was it? What was her name? The Unsinkable Molly or something?
I know.
I just remember seeing her. I just remember seeing her in About Schmidt naked. And I'm like, Inception was one of those movies too that you have Christopher Nolan attached to that, and not only do you have yourself an amazing actor, but you also have yourself an amazing director who changes directing in itself. I think Christopher Nolan is top three of finest in his crafts at the moment. And when you put those guys together, you have yourself. I mean, Inception was amazing, and just yeah, I still to this day I have conversations with people about, oh, was he actually dreaming? Was he not dreaming? And that is the kind of movie that makes me feel like, oh, this is not a waste of my time by liking these kind of things, because it's causing me to grow as a person, because I'm trying to just understand what this process was and everything. And certain movies that, like you said a little while ago, Keaton, Leo is very meticulous on the movies he picks. So when he does pick a movie, it's like, okay, well, I need to understand what this movie's all about and everything. Like, for example, he was supposed to be, oh, sadly enough, Anakin Skywalker, but he walked away from the project because he didn't really find it to be suitable to what he's trying to accomplish, even though Star Wars is his favorite thing growing up. And I'm thinking, oh man, you could have been Darth Vader, but you said no because you felt like the screen, it needed to be a little finely tuned. And he was right, but I wish I could have saw his mannerisms in there, just, and it possibly could have completely changed the whole idea of everything. But
Yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about. So I didn't even know that. So he was
you're welcome.
going, because he would have been. Are you talking about the later
Attack
remake
Attack
or
of the
not
Clones?
Okay, so that would have been.
It was
Man, that would have been-
2002.
Yeah, that's when he did Catch Me If You Can around that time, I think. He was doing some pretty good things on his all by himself. No.
Seriously.
He completely knew what he was doing at that point. He was already had a few really good films behind him.
Mm-hmm.
He would have, I imagine, made those films where they're not regarded as like you could do without them.
Funny enough, I could do with them now watching the sequel trilogy. I'm thinking the sequel trilogy, for the most part, was trash. There were some fine performances by, Adam Driver's always great, and no matter what he's in. Marriage Story is one of my favorite movies of all time. I would want to watch it again, but the only problem with watching it again is it really took a toll on me, because it was so just in your face, and it was just like the way that the lawyer, Laura Dern, she was great. She was probably the best in that movie, but the way she was just being all like, oh, I'll take care of it, and rough.
I'm glad that you went on this tangent, because not very many people I know that have seen that movie, and it was such a surprise. It was so well done, and Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver were so good together. Like, it was such a truthful story. Like, I feel like
it was truthful. The director went through something, and then he wrote it.
Oh wow!
Shutter Island. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, because I talked to Oticelli about it when we watched it. There are so many amazing scenes in there that are amazing actors, but I think my favorite part, even though I hate it because it's something that I don't like to see at all, but he comes home and he sees his babies floating in the water, and his wife's acting all weird. Talking about it right now gives me a stomach ache because the babies. But I remember where she's all like looking at him, hugging him, and he's all hugging her, and you just see his face. He's like, and he has that face. I'm like, oh, he's gonna kill her. It was all conveyed through that beautiful acting portrayal from Leo, of course. But so many parts in that movie were good, but Leo took it home as usual.
I know the writing and was that Martin Scorsese?
Yes, it was.
And they'd already done a few things together at that point, I believe.
Yep. Aviator, Departed. What else? I think there's one more before that, but I'm sure that was good too.
Yeah. That movie, it makes me so uncomfortable because of all of the different things that are happening.
And when you find out too, the whole thing the whole idea of the story is a good cop who probably spent too much time being a good cop and not a good husband, and wasn't there as much. And I think that's what they're trying to portray. But a good cop who ends up at the end of the day realizing that he still has this problem, and then about ready to just destroy his brain. A very sad, somber movie that has a very sad ending, but it was so well done that it's just one of those. I probably watch it every couple years because it is really hard to watch, but it's just. And then of course you have I forget the actor's name, the guy who is in the jail cell who played Freddy Krueger, the new Freddy Krueger guy. He was in the original
Oh yeah.
Bad News Bears, Redhead. Oh, Rorschach. He was Watchman in Rorschach. Anyways, he was great as usual. Mark Ruffalo is always great. Ben Kingsley is always great. There's so many, and that's one thing about Leo too that he does. He always surrounds himself with the best talent that he can find because he wants to make art, and it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that he puts all this hard work into it, but it almost doesn't seem like he has to. I mean, just the front that he puts on whenever he's talking. He just seems like a normal, charismatic guy. He doesn't seem like Christian Bale. He seems
Ooh,
like
he's intense, yeah.
like yeah, just a very intense kind of an excellent actor, but very, very intense. And that's, he's one of those method actors where he completely immerses in a role. And
to the point where he yells at people whenever they walk in his front of the camera or something like that.
Yeah, I remember a while ago watching something about the Revenant, and I think they were on location in some pretty difficult weather, and actually on location for like 6 or 9 months or something, where they were out in the weather.
And the worst part of it too, they want to experience it to full capacity, and like pretty much everything you see besides the bear being fake, pretty much everything else, the hazards and everything was all real. And even at the ending, there's a few parts they actually left in the movie where they're filming Leo, and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of antelope or whatever behind them, and they just kind of start filming that too. They're like, oh cool, we'll just do that too. And then they kept it in the movie because so much awesomeness going on in real life that they're like, hey, we have a lot to work with. I mean, and then of course Leo doing his thing where he like you said, he immerses himself into the movie with the beard. And by the way, I've never thought he looked good with the beard, but that's just my personal opinion. He just kind of, it was always like kind of like mine, like grody almost looking like he's like, what's up, dudes? Cowabunga, man.
Scraggly. It's like, it's not one of those big thick beards. It's kind of, it reminds me of, I mean, Tom Hardy was so different in that movie because he's usually this puffed up, sexy, man's man. And
warrior.
in that movie, he was like a scraggly, like hillbilly type-esque guy, and that's what Leo's beard reminds me of Tom Hardy's character. I didn't like it either, and most of the time because it was so cold, there was something
like booger looking things in there.
Booger that was frozen, kind of like in this area.
Oh yeah, seriously. And you could tell like sometimes it was just so much, and it probably was real. I'm sure it was because that's kind of what their goal was. But it looked so fake because there was so much of it, like a big old thing of slime. Like they're just sitting on there, like, dude, you gonna get that? You gonna get that? There's something about Mary, Ben Stiller. You gonna get that little thing there on your chin?
Yeah. I do know that he did have to get in the water, like the river, when it was super cold outside, and he did have to, when the bear hide was on him after he got out of the water, and it was super heavy. He actually had to trek up this hill, and I do know it must have been very treacherous to do this. And because they were filming outside, I imagine they had to film in such a short time period to get the right lighting and everything. So I'm sure it was a very difficult film to make. So, I mean, finally, I'm glad that he won, and he won his Oscar with that one. But I definitely, like many other people, believe that there were at least a few films before then that he...
Yes, I say for sure. I mean, honestly, and I know this sounds really silly, Katie, but I would say at least 4 or 5 maybe he deserves. And because what I've done is I always look who was compared to that year, and then I usually watch that movie too. And a lot of times it'd be one of those things where, hey, Leo was going against Daniel Day-Lewis, and that's why he lost. But then sometimes I see like, oh no, he was going against someone that had an okay performance. But anything that Leo has not gotten was things that there's been movies that he wasn't even nominated for that I'm thinking you should have won the Oscar, but you weren't even nominated for it. And a lot of times I think
Yeah.
politics is sadly put in there, and sometimes I think it's just, oh well, there's another fine performance right next to him too, of like Sean Penn or something like that. Yeah, I get that, but there are certain things that Leo does that sets him apart from everyone else, and it's like he emerges in this kind of way. And like you said, the cool thing about him too is the moment he's done doing that thing, he's like, "Hey guys, so how'd that look?" You know, it wasn't like a "You must talk to me like President Lincoln because that's who I am."
Yeah.
Oh.
He's gotten, if you go through his rap sheet, so many different nominations,
Hmm.
and he's won a few Golden Globes, but just the one Revenant Oscar. And I think that was like his latest notable thing, I believe. And I think that came out in like 2015.
Yeah,
I want to say
it's
it came
been a while. I think you're right. 2015 sounds perfect. And Leo is one of those guys, not maybe as severe as Daniel Day-Lewis, but he does usually do like maybe one movie every 2, 3 years. Daniel Day-Lewis will do it like every 5, 10 years, but every time you see it, even like the movie might not be good, but Daniel Day-Lewis is like, oh well, I'm not gonna take my eyes off
Yeah.
you. Oh, I blinked. I'm sorry, Daniel. I love you. But I think out of all of his things, Aviator, Catch Me If You Can, which we need to talk about, Catch Me If You Can. But I still think that out of all his performances, oddly enough, Wolf of Wall Street is his best performance of all time. And I've seen a lot of behind the scenes footage of it because there's so much of it where him and Jonah Hill are just standing there talking, and then there's 100 people behind him, and then they do that whole like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then all of a sudden you see him just jump up in the air and go ah, and I'm just like, geez, man, you're not in your own little like trailer right now, just like do not disturb me. You're literally like just standing there with everyone like you guys are a bunch of theatrical people or something like that. But I love it. I love everything
Yeah.
he does. Yeah.
That movie, I think my favorite parts are when he rallies everybody together with his speeches.
Hmm.
And you wonder if, when they're applauding at the end of the speech, you wonder if that's like they actually like that was fantastic
Seriously,
speech,
you see real
or if it was
tears in
just
their eyes.
acting. Yeah, they're like, oh my god, that was amazing. Well, I mean, he completely loses it, and I mean, it pumps you up watching it, and I remember him talking about that movie and it being an exhausting movie because he was like at a level 10 the whole time, talking about, doing drugs and doing super bizarre things the entire movie. Performance in that movie for sure. Just the crazy roller coaster of the different emotions. Because at the beginning of the movie, he's this mild mannered, married to a mild mannered woman, and he's just trying to make a living. And then you go through all of these different scenes where obviously, he falls in love with Margot Robbie, and then all of that stuff goes south, obviously. But
All because Matthew McConaughey and his little. And I remember thinking I was in theater, of course, watching it in theater because I mean it's a Leo movie, and there were a lot of people, and I was in the military still, and there were a lot of people that were just pounding their chest afterwards, walking out of the theater, and I was like, isn't that crazy? Just that one little thing you can do, and that was all, of course, done by Matthew McConaughey, and of course you see if you watch carefully, you can see Leo's kind of almost like, what's happening, and this is interesting, and he kind of just
yeah,
follows suit, and everything just kind of worked beautifully, and I'm thinking, well, there you have it. That's how it's all done, folks.
yeah. Was Matthew McConaughey who won the the Academy that year? I'm trying
Dallas
to
Buyers
think.
Club, was that 2015?
I think he was a little skinny in that movie, which would have aligned with Dallas Buyers Club, and I feel like he didn't win the award for that, which he did great in that too. I'm not gonna crap on his performance, but maybe I should. No, I'm just kidding.
It was, but to be honest with you, it was not as good as Leo's performance in.
Yeah,
I think people were just like, well, first of all, you take a guy, and don't get me wrong, Matthew McConaughey, he's always great, especially season 1 of True Detective. That's whenever Matthew McConaughey shines like a diamond. Whenever you can do a better job than Woody Harrelson in a movie, then you have done it, because Woody Harrelson is a chameleon, and all of his performances although are always loud and proud, like where like his, they're never like idiotic like he is in this, where he's making moronic decisions and he's being an idiot throughout the whole thing, and we're just seeing it at our pleasure, like we're watching Jim Carrey or Will Ferrell, but it's Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, what comes to mind when we say that is the time whenever he puts the microphone, he's like slamming it up against his head, and then he's like, as he's walking back through, when he's done with his speech, and he's making the worst face I think any human's ever made. And that's like a very good example of the extremes that he goes in that movie. And I think that Dallas Buyers Club, I think Matthew McConaughey did a really good job. And that movie had good writing. He lost a ton of weight. Like, I know he went through a lot, and it was a good story to tell. It was a sad story because AIDS is always kind of typically, not always, but it's typically, connected with being homosexual and all of these things. So it kind of opens up like a different area. And so I appreciated the film. It was a very good movie. But the performance, as far as like, okay, this performance that Leonardo DiCaprio does in Wolf of Wall Street, it blows your mind.
It does.
For me.
It really does. I mean, the movie itself is great too. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not necessarily my forte type of movie, but what makes it really good is, first of all, Jonah Hill himself was also excellent with his little teeth and his little and the fact, like, if you hear his little if it hears like story about Martin Scorsese, he's like, hey, I'll do this for free because I want to do this with you. And I think he paid him like $500 or whatever the lowest wage you could legally pay someone. And so he wanted to do it just because he wanted to be in something with Leo and Martin Scorsese. And I'm thinking, what a cool little story that is. And then when you actually watch the movie, you're thinking, you're doing really good, man. And Leo is probably sitting there like going like, oh, this guy's not bad. I mean, he's going for it with me, and we're going back and forth. And watching the movie, I'm sure you agree, Keaton, they're both just as amazing next to each other as separate. Yeah.
I was gonna say he holds his own so well, and their chemistry of their friendship, and it's kind of similar. I've never heard that story before, but it's kind of similar in how they meet each other in the movie. Because he's like, "Is that your Jaguar outside? Like you show me a check for $78,000, and I'll call and quit my job right now." Like,
and he does, and he does.
He's like, "Yeah, I quit. I'm going into stocks."
Yeah, whatever.
Oh, like, he's also like a weird, gross character, because you find out that he's like, no, it's my first cousin, or it's my second cousin.
Oh, that's right, yeah. And then he goes, well, isn't that, are you still related to her, like by blood? And he's like, oh, yeah, but it's not by much, or something like that. It's like, it's like, oh, cool. And he has like those fake capped teeth, and he's all talking like this the whole time, and he's just killing it. So he was great too. But like I said, it's funny because you would never think, especially at that time, you never think, put Jonah Hill in a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. It doesn't sound right in any capacity. This is the guy that I remember watching in 40-Year-Old Virgin, who walks into the store and he's like, hey, I just want to buy these shoes, and there's little weird goldfish shoes, like ballerina looking shoes that a woman would wear, and I remember, I just want to get these home and I want to wear them, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, this guy's not going to make it far, and then all of a sudden,
what a weird. Well, and he jumped on the opportunity to be in a movie with Quentin Tarantino that his character in his movies like Baghead number 2 or something like that.
With like a lazy eyes, like, hey, I can't see out of this thing. Yeah, he's great.
Oh my gosh, but yeah, because I watched a while back. I watched like an interview with all of the major actors in Django. And Jonah Hill was there, and he was asked a question at one point. He's like, I don't even know why I'm effing here. Like, all these people.
Well, yeah, compared to all these amazing, brilliant people, yeah.
Like, I just jumped on the opportunity to say that I was in a Quentin Tarantino movie. I didn't care if I was an extra or
seriously,
Baghead number 2 or whatever.
I played horse number 6 or tree number 5. Yeah, like I was that guy that was holding that fake tree up. I don't care. It's a Quentin Tarantino movie, which of course, and that's another cool thing too. Is like Quentin's now done with Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, he did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and of course just keep all these amazing actors with each other and see what you can do. And there's a couple parts in the Leo movie that was refreshing. One of them being Insecure, when he's like, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I think my career's almost over, good buddy." And he's talking to Brad Pitt, and Brad Pitt's just being, Brad Pitt being all sly and like sexy, and just like, you'll be fine. And he's like, "Oh, I don't know, man. I'm just, these guys, they don't get me." And he's like that throughout the whole movie. And then when you see that last little part when he's he's acting with the girl. And he's playing that like weird looking Pancho Villa looking like mustache, like, hey, he's like a different interpretation of his character Candy from Django, but he's still like he's a bad guy, a villain guy, but this is a guy who just played an evil cowboy like 2 years before, and all of a sudden you see a completely different cowboy villain in this movie, and you're thinking, there it is. That's only someone like Leonardo DiCaprio can be in a cowboy movie twice as a bad guy and be a completely different bad guy, and then being like something like The Quick and the Dead with Sharon Stone and Russell Crowe and be half their age and still have a killer performance too as a good guy.
That's the thing. I think he's proven again and again that he can play just about any role. I mean, Departed, I think, was his first like rough around the edges like that, I think.
Well, he was kind of like bothered, yeah. Almost he was depressed. I mean, he was stressed, and it kind of, you could see like this ticking time bomb on him. Like at that one part whenever he's talking to Marky Mark and Martin Sheen, and he's sitting there like, "All right, get me out of here, just get me out of here." And Marky Mark's being a prick for some weird reason. It's like, you're such a little baby. And I'm thinking, dude, God, it's like he's pretty much talking about wanting to kill himself. Like, can you just leave him alone? He's just attacking. And of course, luckily, Marky Mark at the end, even though he was a prick, he still kills Matt Damon, and we're like, thanks.
Yeah, that movie when he's sitting with the therapist and she's like, "Why are you really here?" He's like, "Valium," and so she starts putting away his folder, and he, spouts out a bunch of stuff to her and is super pissed off and was like, I like, because she ends up giving her 2 pills.
Yeah, that's
and
gonna.
He's like, "Why don't you just give me a vodka and a handgun so I can blow my brains out?"
Yeah, and then he goes, "That could have been a legitimate threat. Think about that." And he walks out, pretty much putting that strain on her, and now she has to like run out and be like, "Why is it always the last guy that's always the biggest pain in the butt?" Yeah. Oh. Well, Keeter, I think it's about time we go ahead and we can end this conversation. But I've had a great time talking with you, and we'll discuss our next one very soon, and we can figure whatever we want to talk about. That's the cool thing about these kind of things. Anyways, yeah, Keaton, I had a great time talking with you, and we'll decide our next topic here in the next week or two, and maybe do 2 a month with you if you'd like, and we just keep on talking about anything we love talking about.
I mean, sounds like a great plan to me.
I like your little head flip.
I wish that I could do the face. I can't do it without seeing it. And
I know. And you did it perfectly in the picture I'm looking at right now. And I'm looking at mine. And the good thing about yours is you get to make an ugly face because he's making an ugly face. But in mine, he's making this very like charismatic, like, hey, like smiling face, like welcome to the party. And I'm looking at him going like, well, I'm not a 10 though. So how am I going to do this? So I'm trying. And I'm literally just taking all these pictures. And I'm like, I took like 5 or 6. And I'm like, oh, cool, y'all suck. So I just picked, the second one and just went along with it. Well, thanks, Keaton. Hey, and everyone, please, the Nerd Frenzy Podcast at gmail.com. Send any comments for any topics. We love talking about anything. And we all hope you have a great day. Love you, Keaton. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Love you. Thank you.
All right. Love you guys. Take care. Bye.
The Nerd Frenzy Podcast.